Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Healthy Design. Today I thought I'd actually do kind of a reaction video in a sense. Two podcasts I listened to recently. One was on Testpiece Climbing, I think that's the name of it, Testpiece for sure. But Josh was talking to Dave Macleod, and they were talking about weight loss. And then it's also listening to one with Power Company Climbing, so Chris Hampton and Nate Drolet, and they started talking a little bit about diet stuff too. And so they kind of both relate to each other a little bit. Actually, Nate was talking about Dave Macleod and just how influential his books have been for him. I agree. I love 9 out of 10 climbers make the same mistakes. Um, but I just felt like there were some things that can maybe be clarified a little bit better. It's not that I disagree with them by any means. I just think there's a little more nuance that could be included in the conversation, which can be hard to do when you're in the middle of a conversation and somebody's asking you questions. Um, I've got the luxury of being able to listen to it, think about it, and hopefully come up with some things that make sense. Um, Hopefully you guys enjoyed the beach behind me. I just wanted to get this out. I might have to switch hands every now and then since I'm holding the camera up with my arm. Probably going to get tired after some point. But one of the things with the podcast with Dave Macleod, again, let me just say, I love Dave Macleod. I love every podcast he's done. I don't have all of his books, but I have a couple of them at least. Love his YouTube channel. He's got great information about diet and different experiments he's done. But they were talking about losing weight. Climbing is a strength to weight ratio sport where that's really important. Wrestling is, like I said, climbing, ballet, different things like that. And so there is this history of eating disorders sometimes that come from that pursuit to get lighter and lighter. And one of the things Dave said that I listened to it again just to make sure. So at first he said you don't have to cut calories, but then he kind of clarified that it was more about not cutting the volume of food. And I think that's a really big, important distinction. You're not going to be able to lose body fat. And normally that's what we want to lose is body fat, not just weight. We don't want to lose muscle. You can't do that without cutting calories in a sense. So I definitely agree with him that you can change what you're eating, and that could lead to you still being full, still being satiated, and that volume of food can help out a lot. Um, but you still have to cut the calories or increase activity. Calories in versus calories out does play a role in things, so it's got to be there in one form or another. Definitely don't think you need to make huge calorie cuts. I'm in the middle of a fat loss phase now, and my calories are actually pretty low compared to where they started. And let's see, I've lost like 15, 16 pounds, I think, as well. Um, and I do feel like the vast majority of that's been body fat and not muscle or anything else. Strength numbers keep improving slowly but steadily in the gym. Just a few weeks ago, I climbed my limit boulder problem and things too. So climbing some of the hardest things I've done as well. So, there's definitely a good way to do it. I think Dave's got some great information on that. You can follow some of my videos. I think there's some decent information there too. But I have to pat myself on the back. Um, but that brings me to the other podcast. So it's one for podcast or for Power Company Climbing. I think it's on their Patreon, so you may have to listen to it. You may have to become a Patreon member. I think it's worth it. I like their podcast. I like the training information and more on the philosophical side of things too. And they were just talking about things like throwing out the baby with the bathwater, different things like that. All right, sorry for kind of cutting out there, but there's other people on the beach, trying to be respectful of them, not be the jerk. So hopefully I'm not. But so you may have to be a Patreon member to listen to it. So they got talking about a lot of different things, and Nate mentioned a book. I think it's by R.P. Strength, Renaissance Periodization, and it was like eating like an athlete, and it was really, really helpful for him. And Nate is, if you haven't listened to him before, he is always serious. He's never sarcastic, never jokes. So I can only take him at face value for what he said. But he said he was glad they kind of threw out keto in the climbing community, that diet. I'm joking. Hopefully you guys pick up on that. Nate's often sarcastic. So, I mean, I don't know if my guess is he was being somewhat serious, but also somewhat sarcastic. It sounds like this other plan has been much more effective for him. So that's what he is doing now and probably believes in. But I doubt he would say that keto doesn't work for anyone. Um, One of the other things he mentioned in that podcast too is the importance of using words and the definitions for them, or being clear what you mean by it, since oftentimes with training there's so many different possibilities. So with ketogenic diet, that's also one that's got a lot of different meanings. The real ketogenic diet, in a sense, like what's been in research, was used for intractable seizures and other issues like that. It consists of 90% fat. The other 10% is, protein and carbs combined, not 10% protein, 10% carbs, 10% combined. So it's an extremely high fat diet. It can be great for intractable seizures, meaning seizures that haven't responded to medications, but it's probably not going to be the best way for other people to eat, or at least the vast majority. Um, and so, I think in this, we kind of see a little bit of bias because it's something that works for us, then we think it's going to go for everybody else. Um, I think Dave Macleod does a pretty good job of not being too biased on things. He's gotten better results with keto or with carnivore diet. And he had a skin issue. I can't remember if it was eczema or psoriasis, but that helped to clear that up for him. And so, it'd be very easy for him to be like, oh, everybody needs to eat this way since it was so effective for him. But that's not the case, because we're all a little bit different. And so, my issue with what Nate said is not that I think everybody needs to be doing keto. When we're talking more in like the sports field or fitness, most people, when they're saying keto, is they're just going lower carbohydrate, increasing their fat a little bit, and they're definitely getting enough protein. And so I think that's definitely one way that can be very effective. It can be useful for fat loss and different things too. Um, you know, like I said, it depends on what you mean by keto. It depends on the person. There's going to be things that are better for them, things that aren't. Um, for me, what I tend to get better results with would be more likely termed a cyclical ketogenic diet. Like during this fat loss phase, 5 days out of the week, Monday through Friday, I'm eating low carbohydrate, getting 200 or more grams of protein per day. My carbohydrate levels are probably 50 grams or less on those 5 days. But then on Saturday and Sunday, I eat more. Saturday, I get like 700 grams of carbohydrates. Sunday, about 250 grams. So that helps I kind of burn through some of the glycogen during the week, replenish that on the weekend. That helps to keep the training at a pretty high level, especially the first part of the week. Starts to go down towards the end, but then I'm getting carbohydrates again. So it's led to training being effective, working out well, fat loss is going well. So that's something that works well for me. Does that mean everybody should do it? Nope. I don't think everybody should do it. I think you've got to play with things and kind of figure out what works best for you. Maybe it's a ketogenic diet with a little less fat, a little more protein. Maybe it's the full-on ketogenic diet. Maybe it's a higher carb diet. You can lose weight, you can gain muscle eating a lot of different ways. Probably going to need some carbohydrates to gain muscle pretty well, but the surplus we need to gain muscle is not going to be very much. A couple hundred calories will be enough. And same thing, if you want to go slow and steady to lose weight, a couple hundred calories per day cut will lead to slow and steady weight loss. So those are some good things. One thing I also wanted to mention, because I definitely remember Power Company talk about it. I'm not sure if Testpiece did, but about some of the eating disorders or some of those types of issues that can come from this. I'm not qualified to talk about that as far as like a treatment sense or anything, but just one thing to keep in mind: being too thin is not healthy. Being too fat is not healthy either. And we all have a range, so we've got like this lower side where, we're starting to get towards like too thin, too little fat. And then at this end, we're getting close to, too much fat. But this middle ground here is going to be kind of our sweet spot where we're healthy, where we can perform well, and just life is good. So I think we want to try to stay somewhere in that range. We don't want to get too far one way or too far the other, because that's when it's going to have negative impacts for us. So we just want to avoid that. And your range may be different than mine. There's going to be some people that are just naturally more lean. A lot of times you'll hear like, oh, hormone levels and different things like this, they can't be healthy if somebody's under 10%, for a man, under 10% body fat. There's going to be some guys that are probably like 6 to 10 just naturally. And we're going to hate them, but that's just where they are. And that's good for them. For other people, say it's 10 to 15. For somebody else, maybe it's, 12 to 16. Who knows? The ranges could be different. So you got to figure some of this out for yourself. There's no way to know until you do it. That's the bad news, I guess, on it. But, don't try not to get too frustrated if maybe you're at that upper end and somebody else at that lower end. It's just the way they were made. It's just the way you were made. You can get down towards your lower end, but don't try to get to theirs. That's going to lead to some negative outcomes. And I do think probably some of the comparison part might be what can kind of lead or make it more likely to go down that eating disorder, body dysmorphia rabbit hole. Again, I'm not qualified to try to talk about how to treat it. I'm not qualified to talk about what causes it. I'm just giving you my opinion on that. So take it for what it's worth. But hopefully you guys got some of the jokes with some of this. This was not meant to be like some critical, treaty on those two podcasts. I love Dave Macleod. I love Nate Gurley. As far as climbing goes, they're much, much better climbers than I am. Dave, like I said, I think he's shared great information about him losing weight and how it helped out his climbing. Some of that too to keep in mind. Dave Macleod is this technical master. And so if he can, just lose a little bit of body weight, since this is a, strength to weight ratio sport, with all that technique that he has, all that skill that he has, he's going to notice huge improvements on the rock. For normal people like me, I could lose a lot of weight and not notice anything. So keep that in mind too, if because I remember for him too, he did a fingerboard protocol, got his fingers stronger. I can't remember the exact numbers, but only went up like a few kilograms, so 8-10 pounds, but yet jumped several grades in climbing. I know that's not going to happen for me. So for me, I'd be much better off trying to get more skill, technique, different things like that. So that's something else to keep in mind. Just keep in mind kind of where you are, how you compare to people in that sense. Not, oh, I want to be like them. Oh, I'm getting mad I'm not them. But like, oh, this is where they're really good. This is where I'm really good. Maybe that's why they got some different results with things than I do. So, all right, guys, I'm going to let that be it. Hopefully you like having the ocean behind me. Hopefully you can still hear. I'll see if I can clean up the volume if I need to. But have a great day. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.